2017 in Champagne has been challenging, both for the growers and the makers. First for the growers, because we suffered frost in many vineyards, especially in the Côte des Bars and a little bit in the Côte des Blancs also. That means that we had very little reserves and a rather small crop. Fortunately, during August we had some rain that has been good to grow the berries and finally give us an average crop. And it was looking good, and we were expecting to harvest quite early. And then suddenly, really at the end of August, we had a sort of tropical weather with very hot temperatures and a lot of humidity at the same time. That has fastened the ripening of the grapes, but that has also been good for botrytis to develop and at a quite fast speed in a way. And so within a few days we really had to adapt and to change our minds when we were expecting to have time to harvest and to look for a very high level of maturity. Suddenly we found that we had to speed up the harvest, that we had to make choices. First to go in the plots that were ready to pick and still clean, let's say, and sometimes to forget some of the plots that are more fragile, not to lose time in picking such plots. So the harvest, what we call the circuit de cueillette, the harvest roadmap, let's say, has been quite crucial in 2017 to really secure the best possible grapes, with initially the idea of reaching something like a 10 alcohol potential everywhere in Champagne. And finally, at the end of the harvest, we had quite uneven level of maturity. With on top of the maturity, the Chardonnay, as often, that have been harvested in average at 10.5 alcohol potential, with a good acidity left. Basically no rot, so quite clean. And for me, Chardonnay in 2017 are the satisfaction of the year, even if some producer sometimes consider it was too ripe, lacking of freshness. At Moët Chandon, we like ripeness because it was give the intensity, the fruitiness and the richness. Then in the middle, both the Pinot Noir from the Marne and the Aube. The Aube, that was the most challenging at first because of the frost and very early rot, finally had less rain at the end of August, early September in the Aube than in the Marne, and therefore the early botrytis has been dried in the Aube, and so we have been satisfied to harvest grapes with a good average level of maturity, 9.5, 9.7 in average, with a very high level of acidity left. That was good in terms of blending to compensate with other grapes that were riper, and let's say rather clean, especially compared to what we were expecting. In the Marne it was a different story. With Pinot Noir we reached a good level of maturity also, 9.5, 9.7, but with much more issues with rot. So sorting the grapes has been more crucial, and even more with the Meunier, that finally have been much less riper than Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. You speak of 9.2 alcohol potential. That is classic. The fact that Meunier is behind it of maturity is classic. The grape hasn't got the same potential, and we like the Meunier with more crispiness. So we are happy with the level of maturity, but like the Pinot Noir in the Marne, more issues with rot and botrytis. And finally, the need to sort the grape and to make selection. But we are prepared to that. We are organized. We'll receive the juice by tasting, doing analysis to really separate the different potentials and to make different qualities in the winery. Fermentations have been fine. As we have had enough water in the spring, we had a good nitrogen mineralization. Therefore, the juices were rich in nitrogen, let's say in food for the yeast. All the fermentations have been fine. And when we have tasted, let's say that we had quite an uneven quality, especially in terms of aging potential. We found that certainly Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from the Aube had a good aging potential and would be, if not good for vintage, at least safe for reserves. But more challenging with Pinot Noir and Meunier from the Marne, that were found to develop evolutive character quite early. And tasting after tasting, we've seen them to open up maybe a little bit too early. And it has changed a little bit our strategy on blending. we have decided for the blending and the bottling of this year to use as much 2017 as possible and to use less reserves than in the past. We have the chance at Moët Chandon to have about almost a full harvest in advance in reserve. So instead of using 50% of reserves in the previous years, this year we have used around 35% of reserves in order to use more wines of 2017 that I believe have less aging potential, and we have kept more 2016 and 15 in reserve. Not sure we're going for a vintage. Again, Chardonnay is only fine, but with the Pinot and the Meunier, not sure about the aging potential. So I have kept some wines in reserve in case of. We'll see that after the harvest, how they have developed. But for non-vintage, we are fine now that we have done all the blends and almost all the bottlings. We are fine. But again, with a strategy of blending a little bit different from the previous years, less reserves, more wines of 2017, not to take the risk to keep in reserves wine that wouldn't have the right aging potential for the reserves.